everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. August was a really busy month, huh? It felt like regulators were tightening the screws and pushing for big digital leaps pretty much everywhere you looked. From SEBI to the RBI, they're all asking for way more transparency and accountability. So we're going to unpack what all of this actually means for investors, for companies, and of course for you. Let's get right into it. So why start with a quote from Sam Altman? Well, that phrase, guide it wisely, that's exactly what this is all about. Technology, especially AI, is moving at lightning speed, right? And the rules of the road, well, they're trying their best to keep up. That tension, that constant push and pull between innovation and oversight, that's the real story behind all the updates we're talking about today. And that really brings us to why we do this explainer. You know, in this new world, staying on top of these changes isn't just about ticking a compliance box to avoid fines. No, it's about giving your organization a real strategic advantage. It's about being able to make smarter, faster decisions because you know the lay of the land. Okay, so here's what's on the docket today. We're going to kick things off with SEBI's latest directives. Then we'll jump into the MCA's big push for digital compliance. After that, we'll break down some pretty strict new rules from the RBI on AIF investments. And to wrap it all up, we'll look at a couple of fascinating, real-world examples of corporate governance in action. All right, let's dive into our first section. We're talking about SEBI, India's market regulator, and what they've been busy with.
So first on the list from SEBI is something of a final call. If you or maybe your parents or grandparents are still holding on to those old school physical share certificates, listen up. After years of pushing for digitalization, SEBI is opening one last final window to get everything sorted. This is a pretty big deal if you missed the earlier deadlines.
So here's a quick look back. They actually stopped allowing physical transfers way back in 2019. But, you know, a lot of people missed the original deadlines to sort things out. That's why SEBI is offering this final 6-month grace period starting July 7th. Now, here's the most important part, the real kicker. Any shares that you re-lodge during this window have to be converted into digital or DMAT form. This is it. This is the final push to get every single share certificate out of paper and into the digital system. Next up, something that's probably going to make compliance teams everywhere breathe a little sigh of relief. SEBI is taking a big machete to the jungle of regulations. They've gone and consolidated all the rules for some key debt instruments into one single, easy-to-find master circular.
So what are we talking about here? Specifically, non-convertible securities, securitized debt instruments, and commercial paper. All the rules for these three are now under one roof. For companies, for professionals, this is huge. It means no more digging through dozens of old circulars and amendments. You've got one single source of truth. It just simplifies compliance and cuts down on a ton of confusion. And this whole idea of streamlining things doesn't stop there. It's also happening with company mergers and arrangements. And the stock exchanges have rolled out a new standard operating procedure, an SOP, that's designed to bring a lot more clarity to what has always been a super complex process. The goal here is pretty simple. By standardizing the whole flow, from the initial filing all the way to SEBI's final observation letter, it should make these big corporate restructurings more transparent and, frankly, more predictable for everybody. You know, this big push for cleaner digital processes, it isn't just happening at SEBI. Let's move on to our next section and see how the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, the MCA, is really doubling down on its own digital transformation. A perfect example of this is the brand new e-form for corporate social responsibility, or CSR1. I mean, this is a major upgrade from the old system. It's not just a few new fields. We're talking way more detail required for directors and trustees, and it's using OTP-based verification for emails. So what's the big picture? This isn't just about collecting more data. It's about cranking up the accountability and making sure the information is secure and accurate right from the get-go. Now, here's the digital shift that's a bit more controversial. The MCA has decided to restrict public access to several key documents on its V3 portal. We're talking about things like DPT-3 filings for deposits, director changes, even sensitive personal data like residential addresses for the company secretary or CFO. On one hand, yeah, this is a move to enhance privacy, but on the other, it's a pretty significant change in the level of public transparency that professionals have really come to depend on. Okay, look at this number, 3 3,000. Actually, over 3,000. That's how many companies the IEPF authority has flagged for being non-compliant with their filing rules. That's a lot. And for those 3,000 plus companies, the clock is ticking. There's a hard deadline, August 30th, 2025. They have to refile their Form IPF-1A, and they have to use the correct Excel template this time. If they don't, they're going to be facing regulatory action. The message here is crystal clear. Get your data right or else. All right, so let's shift gears a bit and see how this whole theme of accountability is playing out in the financial world. The Reserve Bank of India has turned its focus to a really complex area: how banks and other financial institutions are investing in what are called alternative investment funds, or AIFs. Okay, before we get into the weeds of the new rules, there's one key term we all need to be on the same page about: debtor company. It sounds technical, but it's pretty simple. It's basically any company that a regulated entity, like a bank, has given a loan to or invested in sometime in the last 12 months. Just keep that definition in mind because it is absolutely central to everything that follows. So these new rules are set to kick in on January 1st, 2026, and they do a couple of things. They set clear limits on how much any one bank can invest in a single AIF. But honestly, that's not the real headline here. The real game changer is the provisioning rule. Here's how it works. If a bank invests in an AIF, and then that AIF turns around and invests in a company that the bank has already loaned money to, one of its debtor companies, then the bank has to set aside funds to cover 100% loss on its entire investment in that AIF. This is a really powerful move to stop what's called evergreening of loans, where bad loans are hidden through these complex fund structures. All right, for our last section, let's step away from the rule books and circulars and see how all this stuff plays out in the real world. We've got two really interesting recent case studies that show these ideas of regulation and accountability in action. First up, we have a really landmark case of shareholder activism that went down at Zee Entertainment. In what was a pretty rare show of collective force, the company's shareholders actually voted down a major fundraising plan that was put forward by the promoter group itself. So check this out. The proposal was to raise capital by giving preferential warrants to the promoters. It actually got almost 60% of the votes in favor. But, and this is a big but, a special resolution like this needs a supermajority. It needs 75% approval to pass. So it failed, and honestly, it wasn't even close. This just goes to show the growing power of both big institutional investors and smaller retail investors to push back on decisions they think are unfair. And this right here shows you exactly why they pushed back. If this resolution had passed, the promoter's stake in the company would have jumped from just under 4% to over 18%. I mean, that's more than quadrupling their holding. So for a lot of shareholders, this didn't look like a plan to raise money for the good of the company. It looked more like a way for the founding family to get a much tighter grip on control and on the cheap. So they voted it down. Okay, our second case study is all about regulatory enforcement, and it's centered around something called dabba trading. So what is that? To put it really simply, it's an illegal parallel stock market. It operates completely off the books, outside the official exchanges, bypassing all the rules and putting investors at massive risk. So when an ad actually promoting this illegal trading popped up in a newspaper, SEBI's response was incredibly fast and decisive. They didn't just put out a little warning notice. No, they launched a full four-pronged attack. They publicly criticized the newspaper, they filed a complaint with the cyber police, they issued an advisory to investors through the NSE, and they notified the Advertising Standards Council. This sends an unmistakable message. There is zero tolerance for this kind of activity. So when you take a step back and look at all of this, what's the common thread? Whether it's digitizing old share transfers, shareholders finding their voice, or regulators cracking down hard on illegal trading, every single update we've talked about points in one direction. We're entering a new era of corporate accountability. And that really just leaves one final question for you and your organization to think about. For a much deeper dive on all these topics, we really encourage you to read the full newsletter. Thanks so much for watching.